This is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast. I'm Ed Robertson. My guest today is Brady Robinson. Brady is a lifelong climber, conservationist, and educator who currently serves as Director of Philanthropy for the Freyja Foundation. His career has spanned outdoor education, nonprofit leadership, and global conservation philanthropy, with past roles including Executive Director of both the Access Fund and the Conservation Alliance. These days, his work focuses on supporting high-impact land and water conservation efforts across South America, with a particular emphasis on Chilean Patagonia. Brady and I go way back. He was my NOLS instructor in fall of 1999 on a course that involved big mountains, a few navigational hiccups, and some lifelong leadership lessons. That semester planted the seeds for much of what I've done professionally and personally, including starting this podcast. And Brady's been a friend and mentor for going on 26 years. He was also one of the very first guests on this podcast in 2016, back when I only had one microphone and really didn't know how to work it. When Brady and I last spoke on the podcast, he was leading the Access Fund, and a lot has happened since then. In this conversation, we catch up on his career and dig into everything he's working on now. We start out discussing our shared NOLS experience, Brady's leadership in forming the Outdoor Alliance alongside recent podcast guest Adam Kramer, his work on passing major climbing legislation, and the lessons he's learned about collaboration, trust, and long-game thinking. We spend the second half of the conversation digging into his current work in Patagonia's Cochamó Valley, a spectacular and at-risk landscape in southern Chile that Brady and his colleagues are working to protect through an ambitious multi-partner campaign. It's a story of nimble, grassroots conservation work, smart philanthropy, and what's possible when people align around a shared purpose. If you enjoyed my conversations with Kris Tompkins or Adam Kramer, then I know you'll enjoy this one as well. Big thanks to Brady for his decades of support and mentorship, and another big thanks to you for listening. Hope you enjoy. All right, Brady.
Hey, Ed.
Hi.
Hi.
Here we are. 10 years, almost 10 years after we recorded the first one of these things we did together. I think you were guest either 4 or 5.
It was early days.
And we met. I had one microphone plugged into my laptop, and we met at your office.
On a round table in my
it was like a big conference room.
My crappy office.
So I don't know. I refuse to listen to old episodes because I can't listen to myself talk. And
Can you listen to episodes now?
No. I have an editor who's very kind that does all that work.
So you'll never hear this.
I will never hear this. So let's give your take on how we met in 1999.
Well, I was a brand new NOLS instructor.
Yeah.
It was my first and only so-called moving course, I think, because I'd done rock climbing courses for NOLS, and a guy by the name of Rick Rochelle was the lead instructor, and it was 8 somewhat unruly young men, right?
9.
There
was supposed to be a 10th on there, and it was a woman who had a name that could be either male or female, and they realized it was a woman, and they were like, we can't subject her to this. We got to get her out. And
that was the right call.
And we were a trash talking bunch of guys.
Yeah. So that was my first course, and I was the outward bound guy, and Rick was the old master hand.
He was.
And is. And so anyway, I was very much the apprentice to learn. It was my first time at NOLS to learn the NOLS way. Mm-hmm. And so we worked real well together. And then I remember the first day we did independent travel, and we split you guys up into 2 groups, and you guys were traveling ahead of us, and there'd been a light snow that day, And when I worked at Outward Bound, honestly, once your students are independent, it's really boring.
Uh-huh.
I got real good at balancing sticks on my foot. And the other thing I got good at, was tracking.
Okay.
Because I just let's just track the students and see how many there are. And we got to this fork in the road or in the trail. And again, you didn't have to be a master tracker. There was light snow. Anybody could have told you. 4 guys went left and 4 guys went right. And I was like, Rick, one of the groups went the wrong way. And he's like, that's just the way it goes, And I kind of said, if this were Outward Bound, I'd probably follow him. I'd probably tag him for a while and catch up to him eventually and say, how's it going? But Rick was pretty adamant that we we go to camp and they will live by their consequences.
Yeah.
Which honestly, maybe it was the right decision. It certainly led to dramatic results. Anyway, then
let's just be clear. Who was it? My group that got lost?
It was not, but I had kind of forgotten that. But you were. So anyway, let's get through this quick story. So we got to camp. The other group didn't show up.
Yeah.
The next day, Rick took the 2 strong students. You were one of those.
Yes.
And chased after them. And I stayed with the 2, quote, weak students. Sorry if you're listening. And in the camp. And then at the end of that day, what was that day like for you?
Trashed. And Rick was and probably still is, hardcore ultra runner in the 90s. So that's a different breed of ultra runner. And so he was just cruising, but we tried to keep up with him. And we did. I mean, we had light packs, but it's probably one of the most tired times I've been.
But they had like 18 hours on you guys.
Oh, yeah. We got down to the junction at the bottom of that valley. And then I imagine because we were so trash, we were like, all right, well, we know where they went. We kind of went up a little ways, but we need to head out. So
you guys came back to camp that night, worked.
And y'all had a great dinner prepared for us.
Oh, we did? Good.
And it was super snowy too, I remember.
Yeah, it was real. I mean, it was real conditions. And so then the next morning, you guys headed out to go get help. And I took the 2, quote, weak students to track the runaway group. But now they've got almost 2 days on us.
Yeah.
You could still, NOLS, they're known for wearing gaiters.
Yes.
And at that time, we had 1-inch webbing under the gaiters, and it would collect snow, and then it would release the snow. Uh-huh. And even though some of the snow was melted, those little gator poops were still there, so we could still track them. Anyway, we tracked them for quite a while that day, and then eventually they headed off of the trail, off the map set they had. They were acting like they had committed a crime and were trying to get away.
Oh yeah. I mean, they were crossing like mountain ranges.
Yeah. And so these are, new NOLS students. And so at that point I was like, okay, I am no longer trying to find those students. I'm trying to get the 2 people with me out safely.
Yeah.
And we camped right in the middle of the trail, which is not a leave no trace technique. I
forgot about that.
But it was gnarly, and it was, I don't know if it started to snow, but it was blowing. It was full winter conditions. And I was just like, okay, we are trying to get out. I mean, it wasn't like life and death, but it felt real.
Yeah.
So we just literally at night popped the tent right in the trail. It was the only flat spot, and then got up the next morning and came out. And apparently there had been fixed wing aircraft, and those students had run into somebody who told them where they were, and it all ended nicely.
It ended nicely. Apparently it's legend in NOLS risk management world, like a good case study. Yeah, it ended great. And I don't think we as students, even the ones that were lost, appreciated what you and Rick, was going through y'all's head. Because I remember we all got together and they came up, and all these dumb 20-year-old dudes kind of laughing and just talking trash. And I mean, I remember we had to have a full rest day, like just do nothing, because everybody was so trash after that. It's only now as an adult and hearing it from your perspective that, anyway, that was our introduction. Bonded for life.
Right. And that was my first ever moving course at NOLS. Just like, holy.
So that was 1999. I was just saying before we started recording, I was paying attention to everything you were doing. I mean, you were hardcore in the climbing world. I mean, going all over. You had just gotten back from, when we met, you had just gotten back from doing first ascents in Pakistan. And then you continued with Outward Bound. And then when we recorded our first podcast, you were the executive director of the Access Fund.
Yep.
Can you describe the Access Fund for people that aren't familiar?
Yeah, Access Fund is a national advocacy organization that keeps climbing areas open and conserved in the United States. So it's a 501c3 nonprofit. I haven't been officially associated with them for a long time, but I can say they have a land acquisition campaign program. So they've got a revolving loan fund and help with land acquisitions. They do stewardship. They help with grassroots organizing and education, and they've got a really powerful, strong but mighty policy team. And the Explore Act that just recently passed into law, Park Act, the Protect America's Rock Climbing, got passed into law, the first dedicated piece of legislation ever for rock climbing that assures that climbing will be allowed in wilderness, that there'll be some provision for fixed anchor use in wilderness. And so it's one of those things. I'm proud of the almost 11 years that I was there, and I'm just so pleased to see what everyone has been doing and that they've been maintaining the momentum.
Well, that's huge. Maintaining the momentum, and you see, I think a lot of organizations kind of have their moment, and then depending on leadership, it can kind of, their influence can wane or change, or the direction of the organization can change. But it seems like since your long, successful stint there, that organization has only continued to be more and more influential, which is a lot harder than it seems, at least from my observations.
It is, and so I'm real proud of them. And I think, there's a lot of things that don't get as much publicity that they do really well, but that getting that legislation passed is way harder than, if you haven't been on the inside seeing how the sausage is made, that's harder than you'll ever know.
Well, and that's one of the things I want to talk to you about now, is because I never fully appreciated policy, and I started appreciating it when I was in the nonprofit world and went to advocate for private land conservation. But it's really through talking to folks on this podcast that I've really understood how complex it is. And I need to give you an official, very heartfelt thanks for helping me prepare for my recent conversation with Adam Kramer.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Adam, for people who haven't listened to that, is head of the Outdoor Alliance, hardcore policy guy, interesting, a whitewater kayaker, lawyer turned advocate. And when you look on the Outdoor Alliance's webpage, the history, your name's all over it. And so you were there in the very early years to help form that. So I'd love to get, people should go back and listen to that Adam Kramer episode, because we mentioned you several times in there. But can you just kind of give your thoughts on that now, looking back on it, how that all came together?
Yeah. So before my time, so just to be clear, Outdoor Alliance started before I started as the executive director of the Access Fund. Mm-hmm. And when I started, Adam was a contractor, kind of part-time, contracted, sort of our collective DC presence. When I say ours, it was Access Fund, American Whitewater, American Canoe Association, American Hiking Association, and the International Mountain Bicycling Association.
Okay.
Those organizations, it was just sort of ad hoc. We'd get together and talk about our shared interests. Mm-hmm. One of the kind of creation myths was, all those individual organizations would advocate for their perspective on bills or policy, but bills in Congress or policies with the agencies, with the BLM or Forest Service or Park Service. And sometimes they'd be completely diametrically opposed.
Yeah. And
sometimes policymakers would, you guys, oil and gas was in here a second ago. Mm-hmm. If the mountain bikers and the hikers, if you can't figure your shit out, I'm going to take your comments and just throw them away. You're basically, canceling each other out.
Sure.
Figure your stuff out and come back. And so basically Outdoor Alliance started as a way for those advocacy organizations that were focused on specific sports and user groups to get together and have a collective policy position and voice. Mm-hmm. But to have a collective voice, you first have to agree on something. Mm-hmm. And so we'd have the fights inside rather than fighting through Congress and disagreeing with each other when we're talking to offices.
Yeah.
We would basically have to fight in a small room. And often it was the mountain bikers. Often it was the mountain bikers and the hikers who were a little bit at each other's throats, because that was the most contentious when it came to wilderness areas and other things. Yeah. Where do the bikes go? Where do the hikers go? But it was ad hoc, and Adam was an attorney, and he had his own clients, and we were just another client. And so he came to that with that kind of sensibility. Like, what do you want to do? Attorneys get hired to do what their clients want or to manage risk, not always to come up with ideas. And it was a rotating thing, whoever was chair. And eventually my turn came up, and we hired a strategic planning consultant by the name of Luther Probst, who's now a commissioner in Jackson, Wyoming.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. He's a politician. Great guy. And he's kind of he's a shyster. We hired him. We did a 2-day strategic planning retreat. And then, afterwards, Luther and I sat down for a beer, and Luther said, "Brady, I got some bad news for you." And I was like, "What's that, Luther?" He's like, "Your board sucks." And I was like, "I know, Luther, I know. Our board sucks." Why did the board suck? Because it was just a bunch of executive directors who were managing their own organizations. Yeah. And being an executive director of a national organization is a lot of work.
Sure.
And you're always kind of, you're first answering to your own organization and your own board. And so Luther and I started talking. It's like, well, how do we get a board that doesn't suck? Mm-hmm. We need to have people who aren't executive directors and who have other skill sets and maybe can tap into money to pull into it. So one thing led to another, and it became really clear to me we needed to incorporate as its own 501c3.
Yep.
And expand the board. And I thought, once we did the strategic planning, I had the conversation with Luther, a few other conversations. To me, it felt pretty obvious.
Sure.
But it wasn't. And it was actually very contentious. There was a few things. Number one, there was a belief that, and there was some truth to this, if all of us member organizations formed one collective organization, the donors would be like, well, sweet, I'll just write one check to Outdoor Alliance and not have to write checks to IMBA and American Hiking Society and Access Fund and all these others.
That'd get people's attention.
Totally. And so there was this belief that if we created the Outdoor Alliance as its own organization, we would create a Frankenstein monster that would get up off the table and start chasing us around the room.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the main fears. And the other thing was Adam had a very safe, secure situation with some bomber clients that paid him well, and he knew the work. And I don't think he worked hard, but I don't think it was, he had good work-life balance.
That's what it sounded like.
Yeah. And then to let all that go and become executive director of an organization with no track record at all.
And it's just a completely different skill set for most people, going from being I'm a problem solver for my client, whatever their goal is my goal, versus we got a 180-degree view here, and you could pick which path you want. Yeah.
The word he would use is conjure.
Yeah.
He felt like he was conjuring things as though he was just kind of calling them up out of the air. But we needed, what that was leadership, is trying to figure out what's the through line with all these organizations. Anyway, long story short, it took 2 years to get everybody on board. And at the final moment, the head of American Hiking Society decided to take his ball and go home.
Because of the threat to fundraising?
Yes.
Yeah.
And some hurt feelings about other stuff. I mean, like anything, personalities.
Yes,
and
people problems.
It's
always
people problems,
Yeah.
And I'm sure I didn't do everything perfectly. But anyway, of all those organizations, we kept everybody on board except for American Hiking Society. We incorporated. Adam came on board. And I think it's been a real success story. And, fast forward, there's surf riders on it, a number of other organizations, the American Alpine Club is part of it, nice. And American Hiking Society came back on.
Oh, cool. Well, yeah. So I'm always trying to find lessons. Like, I'll never be in that position, but I think everybody finds themselves in a position where there's a lot of people that have very passionate opinions, and they need to get aligned in some way. Like, looking back on that, I mean, you had so many years in outdoor education, experiential leadership, and like, if you had to say why you were able to do that? Because most people are not able to do that. There's so much infighting. I mean, were there any major lessons you take when you look back on that? It's like, all right, this is how we got everybody lined up.
I think there's one, and I've thought about this too, because as a leader in the nonprofit sector, a lot of times you're trying to work well with other nonprofits. And you and I talked about this a little bit. Even the biggest NGOs in the world, like the Nature Conservancy and the World Wildlife Fund and others, oftentimes the people that are running those are at each other's throats.
Sure.
And there's a lot of, and so the question becomes, well, how the hell do we in the nonprofit sector, the sector that's supposed to be doing good, align and do things together? And I think, so to your question about what's the lesson, when you can achieve something greater together than you could on your own. This sounds like a platitude, but it's actually
a platitude because it's true.
It's actually profound when you're in the moment. Because one of the other executive directors at one point accused me of incorporating the Outdoor Alliance as a nonprofit just to do something, just to leave my mark.
Yeah, just
because I wanted to do something. And so what that told me, I mean, it pissed me off in the moment. I'll be honest. I had to manage my emotions. But what that told me was like, he doesn't see what we could achieve together.
Yeah, it's a communication issue.
And with lack of that, he thinks Brady's just like showing off or thinking about his legacy or doing something to do something. But once we did another strategic planning process and started having collective stories about, one of the things we used to talk about was in public lands, extraction was the name of the game when it came to business.
Yep.
And we wanted to change it from extraction to experience. Like the value, economic and just intrinsic value of public lands could be a function of experience, be that, sportsmen, hunters, climbers, natives, whatever, their experience of the land as opposed to extracting something from it.
Yep.
We started having kind of conversations about that. Wow, could we be part of an effort to change the narrative from extraction to experience? Wow, maybe by having a board that doesn't suck and having a more powerful collective organization and having Adam be 100% focused on this, maybe we really could achieve something that would have only been a dream together that we never could have on our own. And I guess the other lesson is it takes time. Like I said,
to build that trust, I would guess there's no shortcut to building
from
trust.
The moment where I personally thought it made sense to the point where we actually had everybody on board and we're ready to incorporate was 2 years.
Yeah, people can go to the Outdoor Alliance web page, and they've got a really cool timeline that has almost year by year. And one of the things is when you sign the paper, making it an official 501c3.
It was hard. It was hard for Adam. I mean, he lived through all that. And whenever you hire anybody, you can do a lot of rigor, and there's also amount of luck.
Oh,
and Adam's been great. I mean,
we've been talking about luck a lot today.
He's done a great job leading that organization. He's still there. He's still engaged. He's still passionate.
I love that guy. We hit it off, man. He was just. I really like his kind of you can see the skateboard influence from his early days.
I like that observation. Yeah, he's got a little bit of a renegade.
Yeah, he does, and I think you need that.
But he's also, like we talked about, unflappable. I mean, I think there's a lot of people in the environmental movement or other movements that are finding that they don't know which way's up under a Trump administration.
Yeah, kind of panicked.
Yeah, he's. I don't know if it's the Class 5 whitewater mentality where there's chunder and water and drops everywhere, and you just, you gotta keep your hips loose, or your boat's not going to do its job.
Well, I made a comment about that. I was kind of second guessing myself on it because he seemed so calm, and I was like, "Well, you seem pretty optimistic about it." And that was like 2 days before the $3.2 million acre stuff came to light. And as we're recording this, just after all that was wiped out, the public land sale was
right.
And I think that's an example of all the hard work that all these organizations have done to team up.
Absolutely. I mean, there was
what's interesting about that whole public lands thing is in my algorithm world, there has been nothing but public lands discussion, and for the last, month and a half, just call your senators, everything is public lands. And then when that part of the bill got yanked, I looked on the front page of the New York Times and there was nothing mentioned about it.
Really?
And I was thinking like that has been everything in my world, and it doesn't even really blip on the radar in the greater United States. I mean, as far as like a big news story, but I guess that's the power of the internet,
Yeah.
You can find your people and make them move. When you think about like leaders you admire or books you've read about leadership, or just kind of how I think a lot of your leadership has come just through being in the middle of it and being learning about it, then also teaching it. And are there any particular leaders that you really admire? Like you think, if I could act like that person, I think I'd be doing things right. And you don't have to know them, or books you've read that have helped kind of shape your leadership philosophy.
A few people that come to mind are two men who passed away fairly recently. Armando Menocal, the founder of the Access Fund, who's been memorialized on a number of different podcasts. Great man, Cuban-American, human rights attorney, product of the civil rights movement, who brought that skill set to climbing and outdoor advocacy. And in an era when most climbers thought outdoor advocacy was yelling at land managers and throwing tantrums, he took the long view and the tools and the demeanor of civil rights and poverty law and applied it to this world. And he was just a great man. And, you and I were talking earlier today about how important curiosity is.
Yeah.
And I spoke to him the night before he passed away.
Wow.
And his voice was weak. His wife had called and said, "Hey, Armando wants to talk to you." So it was a great honor to be one of the last people to talk to him. And he was asking me about my life.
Really?
And my work and my children when he was on his deathbed. And that is how you remain relevant and fresh and connected, even into your mid-80s when you have terminal lung cancer. He's a great man. And the other one, who I didn't know well, but is Charles Wilkinson. One of the great honors of my career was getting to know him when Access Fund was working on Bears Ears National Monument, and he was helping to lead the Intertribal Coalition. And I just got to see his approach to policy and advocacy work. And even though he was a distinguished attorney who, he's written so many books. Helped draft national monument proclamations for the Clinton administration. So accomplished, just a salt of the earth person, completely present, and just had a cheerful wisdom to him. When someone's so confident in who they are and what they stand for, they've got nothing to prove, and they just kind of, he was a loving person, even though he stood for and fought for things that he believed in. Yeah. And so those are two people for me who I think I would like to emulate in ways. And in terms of books, Jim Collins lives here in Boulder, Colorado, longtime climber.
Yeah. Torrey Udall. You know Torrey Udall?
Yeah.
He used to work for him.
Really?
Yeah. It was one of his first jobs. He was kind of his assistant. Yeah.
Oh, he was his assistant.
Yeah. He and some other guy, they worked with him. And I'd forgotten that actually, that he lives here.
Yeah. So I don't know Jim well, but I'll see him in a gym every once in a while. And he wrote the book Good to Great.
Yep.
And then he wrote this short little companion piece, Good to Great for the Social Sectors. It's a short piece. And in the beginning, the opening of the book is basically, the thesis is business thinking is not the answer. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the reason I love that book is I just felt seen and heard.
Interesting.
When I read it, because a lot of times in these nonprofit organizations, you'll get wealthy business people on the board, and if they don't say it explicitly, they imply that we need to act more like a business, that the nonprofit sector is kind of fuzzy, and that's not false. There's plenty of kind of fuzzy nonprofits that are lacking rigor. But Jim's point is like, listen, that happens in the business world too. We're not talking about business thinking. We're talking about excellence. And excellence is rare and something that needs to be cultivated in any sector, business, nonprofit, government, what have you. And so let's get beyond putting business on a pedestal and thinking that the nonprofit sector is lesser than. And let's talk about what the elements of excellence are. And that's really what he was getting at in Good to Great. And then the Good to Great for the social sectors is, let's translate those concepts in a way that makes more sense in the social sector. Because in the business sector, a lot of times, there's triple bottom lines now. We've gotten a little beyond it. But for the most part, profitability, share price, there's some very tangible things
every
that everyone's passionately attached to. And the definition of success is pretty damn clear.
Sure.
And when you're in the nonprofit sector and when you're working on climate change or any intractable issue with humans, poverty, injustice, locally, nationally, globally, what have you, it's harder to measure.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean you can't have excellence and rigor. And so I probably bought 40 or 50 copies of that book over the years and given it out to staff, given it out to boards.
That's powerful.
And it's the great thing about Jim is he's an optimist. Luck and happenstance never show up in his books, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
And you could criticize him for that because that is an element in anything.
Definitely.
But when you read it, you believe that if you follow these principles, you too can be one of the good to great companies. And honestly, that's probably what you need to believe, even if luck and happenstance plays a role in it. And so I just love the concepts, hedgehog, level 5 leadership, these are kind of intellectual hooks you can, collective language, shared language you can have with a board or staff to talk about your work and what you're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anytime I think about the few books that I've bought dozens of copies of and given away, like that's the ultimate endorsement, I think, for a powerful book. Since we last talked, you've been on quite a journey, and we can go into some of the details of that. But now you are doing conservation work, but on the bottom side of the globe. Or maybe
I won't tell him he said so.
No. That could be better. But Talk a bit about how you first ended up down in Patagonia, because I know that was, if I'm right, it was soon after we met. Was your first experience down there?
I was working for the North Carolina Outbound School, and there was a guy who was the director of operations named Perry Norris.
Okay.
He may be retired now, but he ran the Truckee Land Trust for a long time. Great conservationist, great man. And he was director of operations at North Carolina Outbound, and he decided we needed a semester course that had an element in Patagonia.
Wow.
And he had been at PCUBS, Pacific Crest Outbound, previously.
Okay.
And I think his idea to start a program in Chile had gotten shot down there. And so in North Carolina, he decided to do it. And I had taken a few Spanish classes and had like a barely credible claim at being somebody to go down on the first course. Yep. And so he and I and a few other folks, we went down and did some reconnaissance. And then the first course was just me and another instructor and one person that we hired to help with logistics in Chile, who ended up not showing up at the first resupply, by the way. And turns out we made a bad hire in that case.
Lesson learned.
Yeah. And the first course we ever ran was during the millennium.
And so what was it? Was it backpacking?
It was 30-day backpacking, and it was brutal. We overestimated what we could.
Just weather? I mean, not
mileage.
Just mileage.
It was in the Pucón area, and we went from Villarrica to Volcán Lanín, and it was a grind. It was hot. We were days on hot volcanic soils. Yeah. And then huge climbs. And like I said, we showed up to a resupply. The guy didn't show up.
What'd you do?
Megan McGinty, my co-instructor, who had much better Spanish than I, she hitchhiked. We were close to a road, but we were in this no person's land between Chile and Argentina. There's the border area. There's kind of nobody there. We were close to the border. Okay. And so she just waited for somebody to come by, thumbed a ride in, bought a shitload of groceries,
and then thumbed it back,
or took a taxi back.
Did the students realize what was happening? I mean, were they kind of...
I think they knew things hadn't gone totally to plan, but once we realized how screwed we were, I don't know, we did some kind of journaling activity or something.
So was that, obviously you're down there at first course, epic. Did that place kind of stick? I mean, obviously it's stuck in your brain, but were you really just kind of enamored with the place from then on out?
Yeah. I mean, I went down there because Perry wanted to go down, and I thought that sounded cool. Yeah. But I got to know it and fall in love with it. And I thought the courses were excellent.
Sure.
I thought the courses were really, really good. So I ended up running more courses and then was the program director for a number of years down there.
I don't think I think you mentioned that, but I'd forgotten that.
I'd go down for 7 months.
Okay.
I'd go down in like October and come back in March or April, something like that.
Got it.
And so we'd start in the north near Pucón, and then when the snow melted off those volcanoes, we'd go further south near the Puerto Montt, Puerto Varas, and then Bariloche, which is in Argentina. And there's a peak in between those two areas called Tronador. And so we do these international courses. We'd hike up one valley from Chile, climb one of the peaks of Tronador, which has big glaciers on it, by the way, and then come back down into Argentina and then bring the students back through the international border. Wow. They were great, great courses.
I should know this, but I don't. Former guest, very popular episode I did with Kris Tompkins, who's obviously done a lot with conservation down there. Were they started on their program down there at that point?
We did a sea kayak. We ended up doing some sea kayaking down there, and we had to do a crossing through what would become Parque Pumalín. It wasn't a park yet.
Okay.
And I knocked on their office in Puerto Varas.
Oh, really?
I knocked on this huge, gorgeous door in Puerto Varas. And it might as well have been knocking on the front door of a castle.
Sure.
It was locked, tight, shut. Nobody answered. I could not figure out how to get in touch with these people. Uh-huh. And so I never talked to them.
Really?
Yeah. And as you know, I ended up working for Kris Tompkins for almost 2 years, but that was shortly after Doug passed away. So I never did get a chance to meet Doug, but I did try to reach out to them. And ultimately we got in touch with somebody and had permission to cross a little piece of property for one of our sea kayaking courses. But I never got to meet Doug, and it's a regret that I have.
Yeah, he seemed, she is such a force of nature, and I can only imagine him. When I had her on the podcast, we talked about how a lot of her life has been spent trying to rein in, kind of crazy men between him and Yvonne Chouinard.
Yeah.
And she's tough, man.
Yeah.
You were in charge of the Conservation Alliance for quite a while, and then we could talk about all these different chapters for hours, but I want to hear more about the Patagonia. So how did you end up working with Tompkins? How did that come to be?
So when I was, I'll try to make this quick. There was a donor to Access Fund, a young man who gave $100,000 anonymously. And I couldn't believe it. That was something that didn't happen. I was like, I got to meet this guy. And I ended up meeting him, and I ended up getting to know him. I ended up getting to know his sister, and they had some significant business interests in South America and wanted to get involved in land conservation in South America. What should we do, Brady? I was like, I have no idea, but I know who we can talk to. And we ended up talking to a guy by the name of Don Whedon at the Whedon Foundation. Okay. And then eventually I just so happened to be friends with the head fundraiser for Tompkins Conservation, guy by the name of Paul. And Paul and I got to talking, and he convinced Kris to take a risk on these. And at this point, the brother and sister were, as Carl and Ann. Mm-hmm. Carl and Ann were in their 20s.
Oh.
And most big conservation philanthropists back then, and still to this day, are in their 60s or more likely 70s or even more likely 80s.
Yeah, that's what I picture.
And so we went down and we spent 2 days with Kris in her house in El Amarillo. She used to have a house there right outside of Parque Pumalín, what is now Parque Pumalín, but it wasn't a park then. And she gave us 2 days. And I was really just a wallflower. I was there as a facilitator. I'd never met Kris before, but Carl and Ann, again, in their mid-20s, talking to Kris. And Kris said, I've never quite met two people like you, your age, with your means, who want to give back and who want to be conservation philanthropists. She couldn't believe it.
I would imagine her bullshit detector is pretty strict.
Oh, yeah.
And
it didn't register. So I remember she cooked us potatoes. We were hanging out in front of her fire. And then she'd go in the other room in front of her computer, and she's sending emails to the president of Chile, literally negotiating the terms of the donation, the greatest private land donation in the history of the planet. As we're sitting there, and then she'd come back in just like, I was just emailing the president of Chile. And it was so surreal. It was really crazy, amazing moment for me. And then Carl and Ann and I went into the Cochamó Valley because at that time I had known about this place that people were calling the Yosemite Valley of Chile. And there was a really critical property that was for sale. And when Carl and Ann asked me to be an advisor, I said, listen, we could spend a day or two in a conference room with a whiteboard talking about metrics and stuff, or we go out in the field and look at something and see how it feels.
Get in it, yeah.
And so we elected to do that. We went down to Chile, spent 2 days with Kris, went and saw this property in the Cochamó Valley. Carl and I ended up doing one of the big rock roots down there, El Centro y Adentro.
Okay.
And they ultimately elected not to buy that property, but they learned a lot through that process. And Kris became a mentor to Ann.
Okay.
And Ann ended up making a $10 million commitment to Patagonia Park, Argentina. So briefly, Tompkins Conservation used to encapsulate a bunch of different entities, both in Chile and Argentina. And when I was working for Kris, after this moment, she was in a process of splitting them off, and they're now rewilding Argentina and rewilding Chile. Mm-hmm. And they're on their own 2 feet. They've got their own fundraising. They're not dependent on the United States. It was a great decision, but that was a multi-year process. And when we were meeting with her, that hadn't happened yet. Mm-hmm. But Ann saw that the Chilean side of Patagonia Park was when people think of Patagonia Park, they usually think of the Chilean side.
Yeah.
Kris and Doug built a beautiful museum there, the incredible infrastructure.
And I've got a book about that.
Yeah. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. But there's another side to it, the Argentinian side. And Ann saw that was relatively underinvested. So she made a 7-year, $10 million commitment to building out the infrastructure of Patagonia Park and about $5 million to support the rewilding efforts to reintroduce species that were once there and no longer.
Yep.
And so she made that commitment shortly after, like a year or two after that visit. I worked for the Conservation Alliance, ran that for a while, took up paragliding, as we talked about before, broke my pelvis. A few other things happened in my life. I had an opportunity to lay in bed with a broken pelvis for a few months, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what I wanted to do.
During COVID? That was during COVID?
Yeah, during COVID. It was rough. It was a rough moment. But honestly, sometimes the universe kind of smacks you down, and while I wouldn't want to do it over again, I needed it. It was a good thing. And ultimately, I was lucky enough, Anne offered me the job, and I became the Director of Philanthropy for the Freyja Foundation, which is what I'm doing now.
And so how would you describe like your main goals at this point? Because I know y'all had a bunch of different successes. I mean, you've done so much.
At Freyja Foundation?
Yeah, at Freyja. Yeah. Like how would you describe your main goals right now?
It's land and water conservation in South America with an eye towards the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis, and trying to do something good in an area. Why South America? Because the family has a long history there. Anne and I have a long history there. There's still a lot of great things to be done down there. And our model is we don't have as much money as a Weiss Foundation or a Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation or any other multi-billion-dollar foundation you can think of. We have enough money to do interesting things, but the great thing about Freyja Foundation is we're nimble. Anne is young and has an entrepreneurial kind of different way of looking at conservation and wants to take risks and is looking for leverage. And so our model is to go places where other foundations or NGOs maybe haven't gone yet, and to create enabling conditions to create an environment in which additional dollars, resources, and just, man and woman power can be deployed.
How do you, like when you're identifying different opportunities, I would imagine it's, very locally driven. So like how do you identify, you're obviously here in Boulder, but you go down there several times a year. What kind of on the ground, mind trust or whatever groups of people do you have, that local folks that help direct what you're doing? Because I would imagine it's not just people in Boulder saying, "Hey, this is what you need to do."
No.
Because that never works.
No, that's right. And so the thing, so our biggest projects right now is that Patagonia Park, Argentina, where even though it was a 7-year commitment, we're coming up on year 8. We're going to continue working there. It's been a huge success. It's a part of the world that you can go visit.
Yeah.
If you want to. And then the other place we're working right now is in the Cochamó Valley. And in both cases, there was a strong, passionate, highly focused NGO and people that were under-resourced. So this isn't about having, Anne lives in London. It's not about Anne and I having hallucinations in London and Boulder and then going down there and trying to make them reality. It's about finding places where there's great potential, there's risk, but the right people are under-resourced, but they're in position to do something special. And that was exactly what was happening in the Cochamó Valley when we went down a number of years ago.
Can you describe the Cochamó Valley in more detail? Because I've seen, there's obviously, we're looking at there's a New York Times article over there, and you've sent me some cool videos about it. But like, what are the big threats to that area? I mean, is it development or what?
Yeah, it was. So the Cochamó Valley has a long history of which I'm not an expert, but it used to, over 100 years ago, it was a main trade route between Chile and Argentina.
Okay.
And so thousands of cattle would come from Argentina and go to market by hiking over that pass, Paso Leon, and they would come down the Cochamó Valley. So even as long ago as, like when I first went I think I first visited in 2001, I was looking for a route for the students. Like we'd been running courses near there. I heard there was a place called, that was somewhat like Yosemite Valley right nearby. And I'm thinking, well, these courses were already amazing.
Yeah.
What if we hike the students through the Yosemite Valley of South America? They'll be even better. And so I started doing some reconnaissance in there, and there was nothing. There were the climbers hadn't really discovered it yet. Maybe there's a few routes in there at that point.
Isn't that crazy? That wasn't that long ago.
No, 2001. There was no campgrounds. There was just a few little buildings for the arrieros or the gauchos.
And a dumb question, but was this owned by this is owned by the government or privately?
No, privately owned. So
the whole thing?
Well, so there's the floor of the Cochamó Valley is private property owners, and they've made lotes. It's been lotified, basically, subdivided.
Okay.
And so it's when people realize this is a piece of heaven, people wanted to buy it and people were cashing out. And so it's a mosaic of private property ownership on the valley floor. To the north is fiscal land, which is the Chilean word for basically public land, kind of undesignated public land. Pueblo Patagonia, our partners down there, got that designated as a nature sanctuary recently, so that's protected. And then all the way to the south, we're talking 320,000 acres south, huge, vast tract of land, privately owned. And what it was it was given to a forestry company generations ago. In the earliest days of colonization, a forestry company got title that whole piece of property. They never did any forestry on it. And so the owners of that company, there were a number of them, died, and their descendants got a piece of that company.
Yep.
And then their descendants got a piece of that company. And the chain of title got so bifurcated that it was like a total nightmare.
Sure.
And when I've talked to Carolina Morgado, who works at Rewilding Chile, she said, Brady, Doug looked at it, and the title, it was like Swiss cheese. It was a disaster.
I can't even imagine.
We couldn't do it. And so
I've seen versions of that.
Okay.
In the West.
You know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean,
so
it's a mess.
200 claims-ish on the title.
Yeah.
Nightmare. So this guy, Roberto Hagiman, who is the current owner, he's an 80% owner. He spent well over a decade identifying every person in that chain of title and buying them out.
Wow.
Bought every single one of them out. And about 2 years ago, to this month, I believe, got clean title to the entirety of the property for the first time since it was deeded over.
What was driving him? I mean, obviously he loved the place, but I mean, that is a huge...
Hydroelectric dams.
Okay.
And real estate development. He looked at a map and saw that if you put a road from Chile on that old cattle route, if you put a road into Argentina somewhere through there, you'd have a huge real estate boom. And anybody who's been down there and has driven from Puerto Varas to Cochamó, the little town of Cochamó, it's changed massively over the last 20 years. It was, I mean, if you don't care about conservation, it was super smart move. The guy's a shrewd businessman. I mean, imagine if you could buy a piece of property in Yosemite to build a mansion on, or a house, or a hotel.
Oh, yeah.
So he wanted to own that. There was a movement to dam up the Rio Cochamó itself. It could have been, other than a real estate development, it could have been entirely dammed. And then there's three main drainages in this area. There's the Cochamó, the Rio Pueblo, which is pretty well known, and then the Rio Manso. And the Rio Manso was also going to be dammed. And he was building he was building an access road to build the infrastructure for the dam.
Wow.
He was so one of the main drainages, tributaries of this Hacienda Puchiguin, this huge property, which includes much of the Cochamó Valley, was going to be dammed up. And Pueblo Patagonia, this little scrappy NGO, they were fighting him tooth and nail for many years. And they lost, and they lost, and they lost, and they lost. And finally, when he was putting the road in, he was blasting, and a bunch of the tailings went into one of the streams, and he violated environmental law.
That's how they got him.
That's how they got him.
It's like when they get the mob on tax evasion, you know?
Totally. And so they stopped it. And they've been the proverbial stick in the spokes of his bicycle for over 10 years. And he listed the property on Christie's like in 2018 or something like that for $150 million. And if you're a little NGO that's been living on less than $100,000 a year, it might as well be $5 billion.
Oh,
it's a totally unobtainable number, right?
Sure.
It was listed on Christie's, but they didn't have a means to buy the whole thing, but they just kept bad things from happening. And then Freyja Foundation, we came onto the scene 3 years ago-ish, and looked at a property. One of the properties that contains the trail that goes into the Cochamó Valley, 8 kilometers of the trail, had been bought by a real estate developer who was going to turn it into 79 lots.
Okay.
And there was such a public outcry. He went to a public meeting and people threatened to put his head on a stake.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, how how rough did it get outside of just normal business practices?
It got rough.
I mean, was there threats of violence and all that
Apparently,
kind of stuff?
according to this guy, this landowner, there was. Yeah. So, I mean, I will say Pueblo Patagonia has been their grassroots.
Oh,
activists.
sure.
There's no threats of violence, but I think that particular meeting got very heated.
Well, anytime there's that much money on the line, people start going crazy.
Yeah. So we came in, even though we hadn't bought that property years ago, we came in and bought the property that contained the entrance trail.
Like
to
the
valley.
access to it. Yep.
Yeah. And it effectively blocked Roberto Hageman from building a road too for his real estate development. So we gave that developer an out, cashed him out. He's gone. We own that property. And when we were doing due diligence on that property, we rented a helicopter and we invited a guy by the name of Heath Nero from the Weiss Foundation to join us. He happened to be open to it, was putting together a trip to Chile. Weiss Foundation, one of the biggest conservation funders in the world. We flew over the whole thing with a helicopter. It blew our minds.
Just couldn't believe it.
Blew our minds. We got back down. We had lunch with the Pueblo Patagonia team. And Heath and Ann and I got together and we said, let's put down a seed grant and give them a challenge. And so we put together $25,000 and we said, put together a proposal, fake it till you make it,
Sure.
Put together a proposal to protect the Cochamó Valley. We said just a portion of it. We said, don't go for the whole 320,000 acre Hacienda Puchiguin because that's too much for you.
Yep.
I mean, we weren't trying to be patronizing, but we were trying to keep them focused.
Sure.
Month goes by. They call back this Rodrigo Condesa, who's become one of my great friends and is basically the spiritual leader of Pueblo Patagonia. He's like, Brady, with all due respect, we have to go for the whole thing. We're not doing what you said.
What did you say?
I was like, okay. He's like, this is a once in a generation opportunity.
Yeah.
We're going to give you a proposal for the whole thing. You said dream big. We're going big. And so they put together like a 109-page proposal that included deep biodiversity studies, water rights studies, anticipated so-called zonification, which basically means which things would be what designations.
Yep.
Incredibly professional. They pulled on biologists and attorneys in their network and put together one of the best proposals I've ever seen.
Cool.
And Weiss took it back to their board and came back with $15 million. And then suddenly we had a possible project.
Oh yeah.
We went from looking at $150 million on Christie's to having $15 million. Unbeknownst to me, a guy by the name of Jose Claro from Pueblo Patagonia had been negotiating with Roberto Hageman for a purchase with no money in his pocket at all.
Just going after
pluck. That guy's audacious. And so Jose Claro, who's a young man in his, I think, late 30s, has been the point of the negotiator on this project and talked Roberto down to $63 million and signed a purchase option. After Weiss came on board with the $15 million,
Sure.
They basically said, hey, this is a great project, but we need a big NGO who's done this before. And so Nature Conservancy was happy to join in.
My good friends at the Nature Conservancy.
The Nature Conservancy joined in. Nature Conservancy Chile and some key leaders in the international office in the United States. And then Patagonia Inc. came on board. And so the kind of steering committee has been Pueblo Patagonia, the on-the-ground leadership, Freyja, Weiss Foundation, Nature Conservancy, and then Patagonia Inc. Rewilding Chile and Kris has been an advisor.
Yep.
And her advice was, you guys have what you need. Do this on your own.
That's so the lack of ego there, because I could see so many people, even myself included, just like, no, like I don't want to lose control. But it seems like she's mastered letting go, like it's time for other people to
She encouraged us to, she said, you have our blessing. The one thing that she has been concerned about, there's a new law in Chile that allows for private national parks. That's a whole nother ball of wax. We could probably go down that rabbit hole for an hour. We probably shouldn't. But because there's been so much private land, private conservation, there's a number of big families in Chile who have private reserves. And it's unclear what the intergenerational protections will be. When the kids and the grandkids get those properties, what's going to happen?
Sure.
Now, those landowners can get a national park designation on property they hold private title to. And the protections are just as strong as a national park, but you hold title, not the government.
Okay.
And so Kris doesn't like that in terms of a project like this, because for her and Doug, public national parks, not just legally, but what it meant for the story of a country, for their sense of history, for the ownership the people would feel, was one of the most important things about the protection. And so Kris has been pretty adamant that she does not like the idea of this being a private national park. And we take her advice seriously. But that's the only thing she's been strong about. Otherwise, she's basically been, you can do it. And so long story short, we've signed a purchase option, and we're now $52.5 million into a $78 million campaign, 63 for the acquisition and $15 million for project costs. And we've negotiated a slight extension with Hagimon, the landowner, and we're going to either close on part of the property, all of it, on December 1st of this year.
That's, that speaks to, you were talking about being nimble and being scrappy. And if somebody just laid this out, I mean, it just seems so out of reach. Even if, say, TNC just put all their effort into it, even then, it just seems like such a big lift. And it's just so inspiring to hear about all these people. We talked about aligning interest, all these different interests coming together, scrappy, and making it happen.
And we did something that no individual organization could do.
I mean, do you think like if somebody wrote a book like Jim Collins, a good, great kind of book, that wouldn't even be, like you think about a case study or best case scenario, nobody would even dream it up because it's so crazy and so big. And people would say that's impossible. That doesn't make any sense.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, and we'll see. We're still writing the story.
How much are you feeling good about the fundraising? I mean,
I'm feeling good about it. Yeah, we've got a few people queued up who could help us close this. In
my experience, fundraising, and it's nothing at this level, but I've found that if you could get one or two very well-respected, well-known funders, I thought about it like the cool kids table at lunch when you're a kid, and people want to be at the cool kids table, and so they'll see these 2 or 3 funders that are very well-respected therein, and they're like, we want to. They must know something.
It goes from impossible to a sense of inevitable really quickly. Now, I'm not saying we feel inevitable, but there's a sense of like, not wanting to miss out.
The momentum's going.
Yeah. And so I think that's where, again, I don't want to give ourselves too much credit, but that's where our model at Freyja really comes in. We bought that property, and Ann, our president, was like, Brady, if we spent $1.1 million on 309 hectares and that's all we do here, I'm going to be pissed off. It's like, Ann, I get it. At that time, we had no idea that we'd be able to do the entire 130,000 or 320 hectares or 320,000 acres of Hacienda Puchiguin. But it turned out that and then Weiss's 15, a number of dominoes fell at the right times to create the momentum. And then TNC coming in was critical. But we have to be clear, Pueblo, Patagonia, the reason we have a project is because of the grassroots organizers. And so there's a few things I want to say about them. One is they got funding they got $10,000 a year of unrestricted so-called trust-based philanthropy. Like we foundation said, we believe in you. Here's 10 grand. People gave them operating revenues, gifts with no strings attached for 10 years. If people hadn't done that, we wouldn't have a project. Yeah. So sometimes people hear, well, God, they got billionaires, people giving millions of dollars to this. How can I, as a non-billionaire person, participate or help something like this happen? Unrestricted funding to small, scrappy organizations that are good at preventing bad things from happening is the only reason we have a project here. And so that trust-based philanthropy, betting on people, I'm a huge proponent of that. And the other thing is, Pueblo, Patagonia, they live there. Before this project went public in the press that we had signed an option, they had personal meetings with every single family that lives in this area. There's about 65 or so families that live in there. They went into the territory and had one-on-ones with everybody and asked them questions and asked for their opinions and told them what was happening. So they didn't read about it in the press. And then it came out in the press first in the Chilean press, and then it came out in the U.S. press. So there was a very strategic outreach, communication, informing, consultation, and then the news coming out in a way. So, there's TNC has a Chilean office, and you would think, well, that's a Chilean office. Those are the people who would talk to people in this part of Chile. They're from Santiago.
Sure.
And if you live near the border of Argentina, you don't identify with people
like somebody from New York showing out in Wyoming,
Totally.
Eastern Wyoming.
Totally.
Like, that's actually very bad.
Exactly. And so anyway, that's one of the things I'm really psyched about with this project is because we had such strong local leadership who are credible and who honestly, they're amazing people because we have met with billionaires in New York City, and the, you know, some of the leaders of Pueblo Patagonia are the kinds of people who can go in territory and talk to people who live in rural Chile and can brush up their English and go speak to somebody who lives in the Hamptons.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing talking about, you know, we're talking about the Outdoor Alliance and trying to align all these interests. And so many of those lessons seem to be applied down there. And then every conservation episode I do, in the end, if you keep asking enough questions, you find that no matter how innovative the idea, the technology, it's all about those one-on-one relationships. I've never seen one that is not that way. Yeah. I mean, and TNC, for being as massive as they are, everything they do is built on those. I mean, I feel like they have a clear understanding of the importance of that.
You know, I came into this, Ed, with mixed feelings about the Nature Conservancy.
Yeah.
You know, they're $1 billion entity.
Sure.
They're known to be bureaucratic. And sometimes, you know, one of the things people would say is like, you know, when they do a project, they kind of take it over and suck all the air out of the room. And that is not what happened here. Yeah. And it has been an absolute joy working with them. It hasn't always been easy, but coalition work
it's not easy work.
Never is. And
there'd be a problem if it was easy.
Right. And part of the reason that they're at the table is because of their due diligence process. They can come across as bureaucratic, but the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted.
It's locked in.
That's right. And so what I've learned through this is what are big NGOs good at? What are big foundations good at? What are small foundations good at? What are local little NGOs good at? Mm-hmm. And I think if I was to say that there's ever a mistake that the big NGOs make, it's thinking they can be everything to everybody. I think sometimes the long-time careerists and leaders in the nature, I'm not just saying Nature Conservancy, but in big NGOs, sometimes forget how important it is to have grassroots organizations that don't always follow every protocol and procedure in territory. And the people we've been working with at the Nature Conservancy understand and truly value what the Pueblo Patagonia has taken to the table here. And so it's been a really cool partnership.
Well, I think in my experience with TNC, just here in Colorado, there's I consider him a mentor who does a lot of grasslands conservation out in the East. And I was talking to him one time and I said, you know, you guys are so collaborative and you're willing to delegate and you're not trying to hang on to everything so tight. And he goes, well, that's the best way to do conservation. He goes, believe me, Ed, if I could do it on my own and not have to answer to anybody, we wouldn't be talking right now. Right, but I'm in the conservation business and this is the best way to do it. We're going to probably do a part, this is part 2. We'll do a part 3 because we got unfinished business on the Flatirons we need to do. Okay. But when it's not so damn hot.
Yeah.
Final kind of big question, or not a big question, but you've already mentioned a few of the Jim Collins books, but are there any other books? I'm always looking for book recommendations. Anything that you would recommend as far as good ones? It could be your favorite adventure book, could be books about conservation, could be just a novel. I've been reading Jack Carr novels recently. He's like a Navy.
You know what I've been reading right now? So Sapiens, you know that book?
Oh, yeah, that's a great book.
Did you know that there's an illustrated series?
No.
There are 3 illustrated books, big illustrated, like comic books, basically, of Sapiens.
That book changed my whole perspective on the importance of storytelling and that all we are storytelling animals.
That's right.
That's it.
And that the stories don't even have to be true.
No. Sometimes it works better if they're not.
And that's why we're credulous.
Yeah.
Our superpower was believing collectively in the same story, not in true stories. So we are believers and storytellers, not scientists by nature.
That I love. I need to reread it, although it might be kind of depressing.
No, I tell you what. So I'm 2 books through. I normally don't do illustrated novels or books, but I was at a friend's house and I saw all 3 volumes on a table, and you know sometimes books just are instantly objects of desire.
Sure, yeah.
I just saw them there because I love Sapiens so much. I was like, must have. So I bought all 3 of them, and I've been really enjoying it. And it is interesting. I mean, obviously, I think I want to finish it and then go back and reread Sapiens and see how they've handled. Yeah, but I would highly recommend that. And I'm hoping that my 12-year-old daughter I'm not going to push it on her, but she sees volume 1 just sitting around maybe in a year or two and picks it up.
Yeah, don't push it. It will not happen.
Exactly.
Well, man, this is great. I could talk to you for so many hours. We already have been talking. For people listening, Brady was nice enough to help me scramble up the second flat iron today.
We had a great morning.
Super fun morning. But so next time we just record the whole thing and beep out all the vulgarities that come out of my mouth. But you're the man, dude. I owe you, like, this whole path I've been on. It would not have happened without you. Like, no question. I mean, I was often think if I'd had a different, I was going to go on NOLS no matter what. But what if I had had different instructors or different group? And like, you were my first, the first month. And it's like you talking about Access Fund. It got me on this trajectory. And I mean, truly, like, I wouldn't be doing any of this stuff if it weren't for your influence. Well, so you're the man.
I don't know if that's true, Ed, but true. I'm glad I was a positive nudge on your path. And it's incredible what you've built to think that 10 years after we did one of the initial episodes of your podcast, you're highly respected, getting occasionally recognized in airports, partnering with the Nature Conservancy. It's incredible what you've built. And I say this with all due respect, I'm really proud of you.
Well, man, I appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I know your time is valuable, so it means the world that you spend it listening. If you want to support the podcast and help it to continue to spread and grow, there are a few ways you can help. Number 1, pass it along to a friend or share it on social media. Word of mouth recommendations are the most powerful way for ideas to spread, so I'd love it if you could share the podcast with a few pals who might enjoy it. Number 2, you can go to Apple Podcasts and give it a 5-star review. Good reviews encourage the Apple overlords to suggest the podcast to others. So there's a link in the notes if you'd be so kind as to give it 5 stars. Number 3, you can support the podcast financially via Patreon, and there are exclusive benefits for those who do, including a monthly behind-the-scenes newsletter, Mountain and Prairie stickers, live and recorded video chats with podcast guests, and much more. Number 4, I've also got 2 emails that I send out. The first is my weekly email called Good News from the American West, which I send out every Wednesday. It's only positive news, something we can all use a little more of these days. And my other email is my bi-monthly book recommendations email. One email every other month with 5, 6, 7, or 8 books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The thousands of people on both of these lists will vouch for me. No spam or other funny business. And number 5, finally, check out my online store for Mountain and Prairie stickers, shirts, and coffee mugs. I've got some really cool designs from Western artists with more on the way, so head to mountainandprairie.com/shop to check it all out. I'd love to connect with you. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, so look me up on either of those platforms by my name or through the links on my website. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for your support.